Hello, this is Graphic Policy Radio, the show that mixes comics and politics, and we are about to be joined by filmmaker David Brandon Wilson to talk about Guardians of the Galaxy. Are you there, Brett, my co-host? Perhaps not, in which case I will go over David Brandon Wilson's biography. He is a filmmaker and teacher, born and raised in Los Angeles, attending UCLA, where he took a BA in African American Studies and an M.F.A. from the UCLA School of Theater, Film, and Television. Wilson has made several short films and written numerous screenplays. In 2005, he made his feature debut, The Man Who Couldn't, which for under $10K and was on standard definition digital video, which was very ahead of its time. He's debuting in the Pan-African Film Festival, and then last year, his second feature, SEPULVEDA, which premiered in New York City at Urbanworld Film Festival. It has gone on to win a Special Achievement Award at the Culver City Film Festival, Best Ensemble Acting Award at the Silicon Beach Film Festival. And SEPULVEDA was improvised with non-professional actors, co-directed and co-edited by Wilson and his wife, Jena English. I really want to see it. And he also maintains a blog, geniusfaster.com, and writes about film, pop culture, politics, and tweets at great lengths about all the same. And that is how I know him. And I also know that he's a huge Marvel fan, which is why we said to ourselves, the next time there's a big Marvel movie coming out, we're going to have him on. So thank you for joining us, and welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. I've listened to the show in the past. I'm really happy to be here.
Fabulous. So, I sort of want to start by just getting the overall big picture from the standpoint of like a fan and viewer. Did you enjoy the movie?
Right. I mean, because that's the bottom line. I did. I think that the film for me had a huge hurdle in that the first film was so completely unexpected, and that's hard to sort of duplicate once you now know what to expect and you're going with expectations. But I think initially I was a little less high on it as I am now. I think I'm growing to appreciate it more. I think my first response was that it didn't quite crack the code of Empire Strikes Back. That is to say, to have a sequel, a part two that is sort of a little darker and deepens things. And it certainly Empire is something of a touchstone for Volume 2. But I think sort of reflecting on the film and what it got right and what's interesting about it, I've sort of I think its stock is rising with me. So I did enjoy it. I was meaning to go out and see it again, but I didn't get a chance to. Yeah, I probably will at some point in the run, just to sort of look at it again and think about it some more. But yeah, I liked it.
It's funny. I found myself very emotionally moved by it, very much enjoying it, in spite of having some very specific criticisms about it. And then this weekend I ended up watching the original movie twice, kind of by accident, because it was on TV. And I felt like it is not as good as the first, but watched back to back. But it's absolutely a movie that I enjoyed and would tell other people to watch, with a couple of big gaping problems aside that might actually make it something that some folks who I know wouldn't even want to see. I'll just throw it out there to start with, because to me it's such a big caveat, and then there's lots of things about it are great. But I really had a horrible time watching the choice to have the character of Mantis being, the actress was great, but the choice to have a character who's subservient and berated by pretty much everybody on screen be an Asian woman was just really tone deaf. And I think you could have made the same exact jokes and they would have been even funnier had she been played by a large, attractive white man. Like, you could have had all of the same jokes and it would have been funnier, and there wouldn't be this subservient Asian woman trope going on in the background. And it's one thing for Ego to be an asshole to her, because, spoilers, guys. This is all spoilers. Don't listen to this if you haven't.
Yeah.
If you haven't watched the movie, we're telling you go ahead and watch it with this big caveat from me. Now come back and listen to the podcast. It felt like it'd be one thing if Ego was just being an asshole to her, because Ego is a bad guy, but even
Right.
characters who we like continually treat her badly in ways that like are not just products of their character defects, but are part of the structure of the movie. And it was so unnecessary to have it be done to like the first Asian woman in this movie series. So I mean, when I left the theater with my brother, like my brother and I said to me immediately, he's like, I mean, that thing with Mantis was racist, right? I was like, yes, David, that thing with Mantis was racist. Oh, God.
Yeah. No, it's true, and it's on the one hand, and obviously this isn't a news to anybody, but Marvel, the MCU it's been their big struggle about how they deal with Asian characters, the lack of Asian characters, and then how they're handled when they're there. So yeah, it is pretty unfortunate that she is kind of made the butt of jokes so often. And not in a way that's particularly. And again, I think we forgive a lot if characters are good at their jobs, if they have a certain amount of agency. And while she does come through, this is not like the Mantis that I was kind of expecting. And this isn't a character that I know very, very well. I knew of her, and I've seen her in Marvel Universe and read her bio. But it was a very different handling of her than I was expecting. I thought she'd be a little more formidable, and I suppose they can't have two kick-ass women who don't suffer fools, so they had to mix it up. But yeah, it's unfortunate. I hope that they develop when the character comes back. We'll see some growth, and she'll move out of that space. But it's an issue.
It's true because it is. I'm sure she'll be back. I'm sure she'll be part of the team, and they'll have the opportunity to treat her differently. But I actually was also surprised at how little political analysis, or not even political, social analysis, I saw addressing this particular problem. We wouldn't be having this conversation if the character. I think I wouldn't be having this conversation if this character wasn't played by an Asian American woman. That's it to me.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
I hear Brett is joining us now too. Hello, Brett. And why don't we get the top line from you of overall? Did you like the movie? Brett, I can't hear you. I know you're there. Okay, well we'll bring back to that in a moment. But the fact of the matter is, I cried during the movie, and ever since Trump was elected and I began working constantly, getting me to cry is not super hard, but I also think I did not expect to tear up watching this movie, and I definitely had feelings all over the place, and my feelings sort of got leaky near the end of the movie, which is at least a certain amount of an accomplishment. And I definitely had very high expectations coming into it because I enjoyed the Guardians of the Galaxy Part 1 a great deal. Really enjoyed it. And, So
no, I mean, it's interesting that the film Guardians is kind of, for a lot of people, it's at the top of their list for the MCU. Personally, I can't quite go that far. I think I'm going to have to be on the Avengers camp as the best film of the MCU. But for a lot of people, Guardians of the Galaxy is way up there. And, I didn't really – I mentioned this on Twitter. It really just dawned on me kind of belatedly with Volume 2 how much the Guardians is a stand-in for the Fantastic Four. It kind of fulfills some of the same space, especially now that family is kind of coming to such sharp focus as the main theme that it's working on. And, I mean, just as the Fantastic Four is a literal family, and this is, they've become one as well. So, it's, again, James Gunn is to be applauded. This is the first Marvel film that's written and directed by one person, and it's not Joss Whedon. So they gave him, obviously, a lot of trust. And, of course, the last one he, for all intents and purposes, wrote on his own. But contractually he had to leave.
They had the co-writer, the woman who did the initial script of it, whose name has totally fallen out of my head. Nicole Perlman, I believe, and I think Gunn kind of intimated that pretty much nothing of her draft was there, but they had to leave her name, and he didn't want to say that much about it. But this is he's the first person since Joss Whedon to get that kind of space in Marvel to really be the sole author. So it's paid off very nicely, and I hope they extend that to some other people as well.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you, Brett. What was
We hear
your
you.
overall view of the movie?
Stupid technical
Did
issues.
you like it?
I actually generally did not like it. I thought the film.
First either.
I liked the first. I think that the first was fun. I don't think I enjoyed it as much as everyone else. My issue with this
podcast episode. I was listening to our podcast episode that we did last time for Volume 1 with our late friend, the film critic.
I don't remember
Eric
what the
Kaufman.
hell I said.
You should totally download and listen to it because it's a very good episode of the show. I highly endorse it. You were like very lukewarm on Volume 1, my friend.
Yeah, I mean, like I liked it, but it's not a. I definitely didn't enjoy it as everyone else as much, and it seems to kind of. I have the same feelings on this one. To me, the second volume feels like it was. They saw the success of the first film, sat in a room and said, "Hey, what worked and what did everyone love?" They listed out a couple things, and then their roundtable said, "Just do that a whole bunch of times." It kind of repeated a lot of the same jokes. The Mantis was really problematic, and that sounds like what you were discussing just before I hopped on.
Yeah.
I wasn't a big fan. It was the type of movie where I think it just took a lot of the same stuff from the first film and repeated it. So instead of Footloose and Kevin Bacon, it's David Hasselhoff and Knight Rider. Instead of Drax saying something is metaphorical or some jokes about metaphor, Taserface makes jokes about a metaphor. I just noticed that a lot in the film. It almost felt like it was referential to itself and kind of was like a kitschy throwbacker to itself, which might have been the point. But I wasn't too impressed. And I feel like I'm the one person that everyone I've talked to is not impressed with it. I'm kind of baffled.
You know, I definitely see what you're talking about in terms of it taking what people liked and then doing it again. And because for me, I liked the first movie. Taking what I liked and literally repeating it meant I liked this, but not quite as much. So I think that actually is a decent diagram of it in that way, actually. And David, I really, you said about this being the Fantastic Four and how they function as a family, I think that's incredibly insightful. I'm put me down to co-sign for that particular analysis of the movie. I mean, the whole movie was about fathers, right? Like whether it's, Gamora and Nebula talking about their father ruining their lives and making their own relationship toxic. I did sort of watch it, and then I left asking, so wait, was the point of that movie that you should embrace your less abusive dad because he's less evil than your more abusive dad, and at least your less abusive dad tried? Because I think that might have been the takeaway, and that's very realistic about how people are when it comes to their parents, but it's not really necessarily great life advice. My husband actually says that based on the inclusion of the last scene where we have Teen Groot being reprimanded by Star-Lord saying, "Now I know what Yondu went through." Frank's like, maybe it really wasn't that as bad as as the Star-Lord made it out to be. Everybody's parent does have some joke that they make that's not really funny that they just can't stop themselves from making, and that we're going to eat you is like that joke that they could just never let go. And maybe Star-Lord leaving the Ravagers to start doing his own thing is just like the normal part of growing up, separating yourself from your parents, and not necessarily the product of like actual trauma that was done to him. We really don't know. Mm-hmm. And the thing is that Michael Rooker as Yondu is so likable. Like, we don't even really have the ability to judge that from what we've been given. They do have those flashbacks showing him how to shoot, which must have been there for, like, a reason to signal something. But it's kind of unclear how we're supposed to read them in the end of the day, other than we all cried when he died. Because, I mean, I certainly cried when he died.
Yeah.
I did. I won't lie.
Yeah, it also, it's funny because this is coming on the heels of Logan, which is another, comic book movie that's about sort of father figures, and all of it kind of fits under the umbrella of what Steven Spielberg's done, where fathers in every Spielberg film, either someone is a bad dad or they have one. It's one or the other. I wrote a blog on it quite a while ago, sort of comparing his dad issues to Spike Lee's dad issues, and this definitely feels like sort of the Spielbergian what happens in Volume 2. Where it's just, literally everybody is even Rocket is sort of now in this sort of parent role towards Groot, who he has to sort of protect, even though they're all sort of parenting Groot to a degree. But yeah, it's interesting to see that, especially right now, having just elected someone to the White House that a lot of people refer to as sort of this, like, Big Daddy kind of, a lot of language about that, and like, Big Daddy gets mad, but see, he gets his way, so let's just do what he says, and everything will be fine. Because I said on Twitter, I totally read Volume 2 as sort of about Trumpism and rejecting it in favor of rejecting Trumpism, especially for the storied white working class voter, Star-Lord from Missouri, no less. So it's rejecting that kind of thing in favor of diversity, in favor of, embracing the people around, the diversity around you, and that's really what makes you stronger, is ultimately more healthy for you than holding on to some fantasy that something you're entitled to is going to come along and, and make you into this thing that you always dreamed of. It threatens to make his nickname, which has been a joke, Star-Lord, it almost becomes literal because, he literally now has the possibility to become a star, a divine figure. And in the end of the film is sort of saying that's not, turn away from that. It's no good. So, yeah, I found all that interesting.
I'm incredibly impressed by that analysis, and it makes a lot of sense to me.
I literally see Trump in everything I watch now, though. So I don't know. Everything I watch now, to me, it's like, this is about Trump. My wife is almost sick of hearing it because I'm seeing it everywhere now. Because that this whole thing that we're going through as a nation right now, that we fail to listen to the lessons of our cinema and literature, and now we're paying for it. But it totally just seems to me like that's where it's coming from. So.
Well, I definitely identify. Sorry, go ahead.
You're breaking up a little bit.
Sorry. I was when I walked out of it initially, my first thought about Ego was that he was straight up the colonial person planting his flag throughout the world and trying to spread his vision to foreign nations. Yeah,
he's literally colonialism, in the sense that. And I love the touch of the fact that he has these literal museum exhibits he creates to display this, which is very much in line with how museums have shown, and here's how we beat the, quote, Indians, quote, and here's the section about all those grateful Africans that we brought with us. It was the same sort of really effed up movie dioramas displaying our colonialist past. I mean, maybe this is a very, I grew up going to museums in D.C. a lot perspective, but to me, I totally associate that particular kind of museum display with colonialism. So that design touch, to me, was just, really on the nose. I definitely focus on Ego as a metaphor. I love that they kept. I mean, the name of the character from the comic is Ego, the living planet, and Ego means something specific in terms of the the Freudian term, and I think it's what happens when he's unable to regulate or control his desire is it actually becomes toxic, and he becomes the only person allowed in the world. And as a result, he ends up being lonely and then has to be destroyed and is rejected by his son. One of the things that I also really – sorry.
No, I was just going to say, and, I think I was just going to say real quick, and James Gunn deserves a lot of credit for zeroing in on Ego as an antagonist, because it's, of course, for those who were familiar with the comics, Star-Lord's dad is actually Jason, this emperor of the Spartaks, and so Gunn made it clear early on after Volume 1 that he was going to diverge from that. So that was really a kind of a genius idea to of all the people to go dig deep for this character. Ego was created in 1966, so he's been around for quite a while. But yeah, this is not someone that is like very not a popular character necessarily. So yeah, it really he deserves a lot of credit for finding him and then putting him and using him so brilliantly to express all of that.
Yeah. I mean, one of the things I really liked about the last film was how present Star-Lord's mother was as a character because of the soundtrack and because of his respect for her and the opening of the film. And it was great to have her included here, too. I think that was particularly important. She has a specific face and voice, and, continuing to soundtrack the movie with her taste in music is completely essential. One of the things I heard some folks. Okay, well, first of all, people, you need to know that this is 70s and 80s. It's not just 80s. It's 70s and 80s. I don't know why people don't know this. Are you all that young? But aside from that, I actually heard people complaining like, oh, if Star-Lord's mom was cool, she would have been listening to New Wave. And I just wanted to shake them because Star-Lord's mom lives in the middle of nowhere, Missouri. So she doesn't have access to a college radio station playing cutting-edge music from England. What she does have, though, is access to broad range of AM and FM radio. What she has done is chosen really good songs from within what's available to her. So she doesn't have obscurist taste or hipster taste. She has good taste in popular music. And that's better than most people have. Most people listen to any old shit. So I still think it's a style statement to his mom being a person with good taste. I will say that I like the soundtracks for the other movie more than this one. I mean, I'm not just because they played one of my favorite Bowie songs of all time, but because there actually were movies in this soundtrack that I found kind of boring. There were great punctuation points, like Using the Chain by Fleetwood Mac was fantastic, but I spent the whole movie waiting for them to play another song by Sweet, like they did in the trailer and like they did in the last movie, and just not having a song by Sweet in this is just such a loss. Like, Sweet is the perfect glam, space, pop music, mom-friendly, because they definitely had a big female following rock band to include. And I come a little bit closer and how that was chosen for the Yondu and Raccoon escape sequence, really well done. But there weren't as many standout song moments in this movie as in the last. Did those sequences work for you?
I would agree. I think that the song choices for Volume 1 were pretty extraordinary. For instance, I think when the Bowie song comes on, Monet's Daydream comes on, you know at that moment that you're in the hands of a superior filmmaker, because a mediocre filmmaker would have chosen Space Oddity. There's just no bad filmmaker would have ever said, let's use Monet's Daydream. They would have said, oh, no, we got to use Space Oddity. It fits. So, yeah, and I really think, I mean, it's easy to sort of dismiss music choices as being sort of superficial, what have you, but I think music is that reveals the soul of a filmmaker. It really does. And, like, the songs that they pick, how they use them, and yeah, you know that you're in good hands. That said, yeah, I did sort of prefer the soundtrack for the first film a little bit more. I thought some of the tracks in this one, which we were all waiting to hear, what would it be? It just didn't quite capture something. It just didn't quite do as much for the film, I think, as it did the first time around. Although I will say, and again, my Twitter followers have already seen me gloat about this kind of obnoxiously. I did, after the first film, I did an analogy for each of the Marvel sort of super groups in Marvel. I likened them to a classic rock band, and the day after I saw Guardians, the first thing I did right is I said, at first I thought Roxy Music, but then I immediately said, no, it's ELO is the band that represents the Guardians. And then when Mr. Blue Sky starts in Volume 2, I was sort of, I had a little satisfaction because that band, that sound really fits who they are. And I get totally for some people, that opening with Groot dancing around the ELO, I know there's people who are just going to be out at that point. They're just like, nope, can't. This is too cute. This is too what have you. And I can't fault anyone for that. I think that scene, it's an great opening, because either you buy in or you don't. It's either, if you want to sort of go, come on, the cute dancing tree, dodging all the, being so cutesy with the music, but it's that's sort of the series. Either say you buy in or you do not.
Well, I really felt the opening sequence was excellent, because I love the trick of having the swirling action happening in the background, out of focus, just off camera, when focusing on the beautiful physical comedy of Groot. I thought it was very witty, and it sort of shows you that the movie ultimately centers the characters more than just the action sequences. It sort of is a metaphor for that for me, and I thought it was very funny.
It was great, and also, go ahead.
I was going to say, one of the things that Scott Eric Kaufman, who joined us for the last movies, had observed, which just knocked my socks off, and I feel like it's become something that other people say now, and they might not know where it came from, is the jailbreak sequence of the last film, where Rocket Raccoon is explaining what he needs from folks in order to be able to do the breakout, but how it's not possible without these things, and Groot literally just starts doing it behind him. That is literally a Marx Brothers sketch from Animal Crackers, and Groot is Harpo, right, because he doesn't talk, and he's smart, but he can't speak. He just does things and executes them. And Rocket is Chico, who's like the schemer who's talking. And I that dynamic definitely continues here, but it also made me think about, like, okay, so then which one is Groucho and which one is Zeppo? And I kind of think Star-Lord might have to be Zeppo, just because he's the one who does the romantic scenes with the ladies and, like, sings a little bit of a song. I'm not sure. But but I wanted to bring that back, because I do think that Marx Brothers humor is continued here, but there isn't a scene that's quite as, like, in some ways, I suppose the don't press this button, press that button is a little bit of a who's on first kind of thing, only without the language. It's about the physical gestures instead. And the don't press this button sequence is fucking hilarious. I mean, truly hilarious.
That's really interesting. And no, that's great about classic comedy, absolutely, in both films. I think, and also I want to say about the opening is I really zeroed in on how much the first film, people called it a space opera, which of course it is, but I really zeroed in on how much Volume 1 was a Western. And how it took those sort of the tropes and the sort of ticks of the Western and brought that into science fiction, which is, of course, not new. That's been done before. And I don't feel as much, I don't see it quite as much in Volume 2, but I thought it was interesting that the musical is suddenly, for me, in that opening with the Groot and the dancing and suddenly the musical, the debt owed to the musical really became more obvious. Even though the first film also started with someone dancing, doing a musical number, and in a way, and I know this, the people who don't love the Guardians films will sort of disagree, but I think the secret is that it takes all of these things that sort of are key to sort of the pleasure of movies, comedy, music, the sort of good guy, a stranger rolls into town, and it just kind of puts them all together in this really satisfying sort of new superhero sci-fi package. And so, it's the musical, it's the comedy, it's a Western, and all of those at once while being something new. And I mean, I think that's why it really clicks with people more than any other of the series that Marvel's done. And of course, what Marvel's brilliance is that they make their films, they generally make the film sort of mimic some sort of other genre or movement of film, whether or subgenre. And for Guardians, I don't know if it's one, it just seems to be like it takes a few of our favorite, most cherished things. Because one of my pet theories is that the Western and the musical are at the core of movie love. You don't have to love both of them, but if you are a real movie fanatic, you probably love one. You either are a musical person or you're a Western person, which of course is interesting because then there's the whole gendered aspect. You know, the musical being associated with femininity, the Western being the sort of associated with masculinity. Although that's not, you know, that's you can shoot holes through that as well. And of course, I love both equally, but it's definitely, I think, that's at the heart of what makes movies unique and pleasurable. And Guardians really attempts to cover both of those.
What did you guys think of the Ego the Living Planet landscape? Just how we moved over it and saw it. I heard that they hired a fractal artist to do some of the initial design work on that, which makes a lot of sense to me. I mean, one of the things I loved about the first movie was that it actually had an aesthetic sensibility, and I feel like a lot of the Marvel films don't even seem to have one. This one, I think, certainly the Ego Planet had one, but and so did the scenes with the Sovereign Planet. I guess maybe I've come to notice it less because we've experienced it before, but what did you guys think about that?
I think it was. I liked the planet a lot. I wish we kind of could see maybe more of it. I mean, it looked beautiful, like the special effects and kind of what they put together was great to look at and visually really impressive. And in 3D, it really popped, especially some of the bubbles that were out there. And that one scene when they're kind of flying over, and I forgot who presses the bubble. I think maybe it was Drax. So that was really, really interesting. So visually stunning. I just don't think they used it enough. Like, it was basically a set as opposed to really taking advantage of the fact that it's an extension of Ego. I think I probably would have liked to see something more in that department. But even when I say that, I have no idea what that would be.
Just to interact with it more, to like run through the water, swing from the trees, that kind of thing.
Right. I mean, he can control the planet, so like walking around, you think he would do cool things of like maybe the place would kind of change as he walked, or maybe, you know, rocks would form and he would be able to sit down or something of that nature. I don't think they emphasized enough of how connected he as a person was to the planet, but maybe that was part of the point of it too. Because it's eventually, you know, there's that eventual twist when we see the face on the planet, and I think at that point the click of it's one and the same. But I think at that point they've also said it's one and the same.
Yeah, they have said it at that point. You know, David, you have kids. Were they surprised by the fact that Ego was bad? Did they see that coming?
Yeah, it was a surprise, I think. Actually, you know what? I retract that. My 5-year-old, I think, frankly, it was a little too long for him, and he's not the most a movie attentive. So he kind of, I don't know how, he hasn't really talked about it that much. And he probably was too young for it anyway. It was a little noisy. But he's a big fan of the first one, which he watched here. You know, he's watched that endlessly. The teenager actually said that he just assumed that if Kurt Russell was in it, that he had to be a bad guy. He didn't think that Kurt Russell would be in it and be just, you know, the Obi-Wan, just his helpful father figure. So he actually said he was not. I will admit I fell for it. The sort of ruse of having the Sovereign be there. It's clearly this sort of, you know, it's easy to dislike them and feel so that there's something sinister about them. And so I totally fell for that. I'm just even the video, the featurettes that they released on the YouTube, you know, really highlighted that Taserface and Aisha, I'm not sure about the pronunciation, that they were the villain. So I will admit that I did not see it coming, that Ego was in fact a villain. And I mean, I knew he was going to be important, I just wasn't sure. And I would say echo that I also thought that they would do a little more with the Ego, the fact that this guy can basically remake the planet in any, you know, instantaneously any way he wants to, because it's him. You know, I don't know if I maybe I've watched Brazil too many times, but, you know, skyscrapers suddenly appearing in a city and that kind of thing. But, you know, that didn't happen. You know, that's what I expected. And I also, I appreciated that it had such a very specific sensibility. This is the opposite from, in my opinion, the worst was example of this is Thor: The Dark World, when you see Svartalheim and the Dark Elves, the realm of the Dark Elves, and it's just basically black sand, and that's it. There's no structures, there's no nothing. And to me, that was like one of the biggest artistic failures or creative failures in the whole MCU, which I hope they've learned from that. So at least it wasn't something that simple where it's just this, one thing. And so, and of course the psychedelic sensibility is it's all of a piece with Guardians. It's important to note that almost all these characters are created, in the 3 of them are from the late 60s. I was just looking this up. Good 4 the 4 core 4 are from the 70s, and so back to music too. I mean, that's part of why I think Gunn centers on, although it's not all 70s, like he centers on the 70s because that's where these guys come from. Mantis and Drax are both 73, Gamora 75, Star-Lord 1976. That's their era, and instead of trying to run away from that, I appreciate that they sort of lean into the fact that these are very 70s characters and make that a feature rather than a bug.
It's funny because I'm a huge Hawkwind fan, and I'm all like, oh, they need a Hawkwind song. But there's no reason that his mom, as an American, would have Hawkwind song in her music collection. If her exact personal equivalent in England very well might. But there's no chance that his mom. But I just look at those colors, and I'm like, this is the cover of a Hawkwind album. That's what this is. I also just wanted to say about Eagle of the Living Planet, like, I'm a huge fan of Kurt Russell, just in general. I think he's wonderful. And the fact that they chose him, I mean, I'm sure it partially had to do with the fact that he was an actor who they have tons of reference images of what they looked like as a younger person that they can play off of, right? But one of the things that was fascinating is when you actually see him doing those dioramas of his colonial past. And every single one of those dioramas, he's a human. He's not whatever random species he's mating with, which just really shows you that he's just showing Peter what Peter wants to see, because Peter doesn't want to see his dad as an 80-tentacled creature with needles for teeth. Peter might have had sex with one of those once, but it was only for information. Peter wants to see his dad as looking human like him. So, like, the view of what we get him to see is what does he want Peter to look like? And then I never particularly noticed the visual similarity between Hasselhoff and Kurt Russell, but it is there. Like, they could be cousins, you know what I mean? Like, Sylvester Stallone and Kurt Russell could not really, but Kurt Russell and Hasselhoff could be. So it's an interesting subtle thing, and I also look like this actor who you like. But then I realized that actually we see the actual flashback of him with his mom, so we know that he does look like Kurt Russell when he is in Missouri. That is true because we saw it in the past.
And that's got to be some of the best.
Though, I totally forgot that was going to be a thing, and I'm realizing this is like the Tango and Cash reunion.
Right.
I totally forgot about that. Good call. Nice reference on that one.
Yeah.
Yeah. What do you think?
Ving Rhames was the one that jumped out at me.
Oh.
At the end, I saw him. I was like, holy shit, Ving Rhames.
Oh, Michelle Yeoh. I don't know. I'm so upset that Michelle Yeoh hasn't been in the Marvel Universe before, and I just want to have a movie of her being a space pirate, because she is a goddess.
Yes.
And
Michelle Yeoh.
Far too little of her.
I mean, she should be huge. I mean, she was amazing in she's the best thing in the James Bond film she was in. I mean, that woman should have had a bigger career than she's had, and I mean, it's not too late. But yeah, it was great to see her in there, and that was Miley Cyrus voicing the robot that's just ahead. I'm blanking on the name of the robot. I'm sure someone out there knows it, but that was Miley Cyrus.
Weird.
Also. So yeah, I don't know how much we're going to see of the sort of Guardians 1.0, the sort of the older group. It'll be interesting to see how they figure in, if they save them, because of course we're going to see the Guardians next in Infinity War and whatever the sequel is called, and then Guardians, by the time we get to Volume 3, that will be over. Presumably some of our characters may not have survived the battle against Thanos, so it's hard, who knows what's going to happen by the time we get to Volume 3, but we do have that huge thing in between Volume 3 and now, so we will see them sooner than we would normally.
So Miley Cyrus was
really
Mainframe.
Mainframe, very good. Yes.
One of the things that I was I'm happy to have a female voiced robot. Like, there aren't enough random female voices in this universe, but I was glad to have actual real character development between Gamora and Nebula. Like, Gamora had like, nothing to do in the earlier movie whatsoever. Nebula had no acting to do. In this moment, they actually had like real acting and real issues. And it's definitely something that fans had called for, and Gunn had said that he heard us, and then he went and did it. But the other thing fans had called for, which he did not do, which is not entirely on him, but is certainly partially on him, is here we have all of outer space, and nobody's queer. Like, all of space, all of the world. A woman has sex with a planet, and a woman can only have sex with a male planet. Like, there's only like women fucking planets, so there's no women and non-binary people who are like identify bodily non-binary. And what's really crazy is when you see the Ravagers in that Pleasure World planet, they're hanging out with these yellow-skinned sex bots, which, you know, like, why not? But if they're going to have, like, Ravagers having sex with sex bots and they can't have an LGBTQ character because it's a kids' movie, that's insane.
Yeah.
Gunn's response to that was interesting.
His response was fucking bullshit, but I'll let you tell it. I will continue on my thoughts on that one.
Well, so Gunn basically, like, fluffed it off with the one of them could be it just hasn't been addressed yet, was kind of to summarize what he said. I don't remember what the exact wording was, but that was the gist of it.
But it totally came off as like a in your mind like kind of thing from what I could read. And if we're never actually given like that on screen, it doesn't matter. Like, one of my friends definitely said that they thought you could read Gamora as asexual, actually. Certainly there's no reason not to believe that. And, you know, I said to them, like, yeah, Gamora could definitely be ace based on what we've seen, but the movie will never let it settle that way. Like, I'm glad that the movie does not center on romantic attraction and flirtation between her and Quill, because that would get old fast, frankly. But I still expect the film to eventually go that direction, even if, you know, my friend was able to see, like, perhaps an interpretation of a character as being asexual.
Yeah, well, you know, and who knows what happens when Quill sees Black Widow? You know, that could all get complicated. I did hear that in some of in the Black Panther footage, there is a bit of flirtation between the Dora Milaje character that we've seen up to now. Before now, it's she was in Civil War, and another, I believe, that with her and Lupita Nyong'o's character, perhaps. Like, so there is a little, which is an echo of what they're doing right now in the comic with the World of Wakanda comic with the relationship between the two renegade Dora Milaje, Anika and Io. So
they
there
denied
may
it.
be.
They denied it. They were asked if they would be a romantic relationship, and they literally denied it, even though that's actually in the text of the comic itself. But they actually were asked. They said there would not be a romantic relationship between them. So it's the usual thing where it's like, we're going to see subtext. I mean, I didn't even see subtext in this movie, right? But, like, it's going to be the usual thing, like, where we're going to see subtext maybe in something, and then they'll act like they're doing something huge by doing it. But or
they just don't address it and they hint at it. They said there's not going to be a romantic story, but it doesn't mean they're not going to have flirting or hint at it.
Yeah, we may very well have some flirting, nevertheless. But yeah, it's unfortunately it seems to be we still got a ways to go with that, with having those kind of representations. But you know, I feel like it'll come in time. But we nevertheless have to sort of keep pressure on them to let them know it's important.
Yeah, and like not let them get away with being cutesy about it. It's just so silly to have space of all places. Like, they could even get away with having non-gendered or gender non-specific, like, aliens, you know. I mean, why are they able to have sex bots and not LGBTQ people? Like, that really goes to show where we rank in their hierarchy of what they consider to be normal and healthy. It's fucking bullshit.
Prostitution's okay, but...
Yeah, exactly. And prostitution, by the way, is okay. But
it is fine, yeah. Prostitution is okay to show, but LGBT, not so much. That's more I was getting at. Sorry. Probably should have finished that sentence.
And I know you mean that. But one thing I wanted to bring up, actually, David, is with films, it's always a struggle to get people to sit and like watch the credits, right, and actually see the credits. And I really feel like, you know, in general, Marvel, by having this post-credit sequence, have gamed the system to make people see and actually watch the credits, and that's kind of radical and wonderful.
Yeah.
But in this particular movie, they actually had the credits themselves be a game, right? Like they had different names sort of animated, so you actually physically read the credits. I don't think I've ever seen another movie that enforced you to read the credits this way, and I love it.
No, it was very innovative. Also, you know, of course, as I'm sure everyone noticed, that Jeff Goldblum was, as the Grand Master, was in there, which is, you know, very unusual to sort of, they know we've seen him in the trailer, so they have him in there ahead of time, and of course he fits because it's, you know, he's a cosmic character. No, it was, again, there's a playfulness that really works with this, with these two films that just stands in such contrast to a lot of what goes on in comic book films, specifically DC and the sort of the Christopher Nolan approach and what they're doing in DC post Nolan. It's nice to see them sort of work with that, and it's not easy to pull off. It's, you know, it's not like it's less risky to be playful than it is to be serious. In fact, it might actually be a bigger risk to sort of try to be silly and like that. So, you know, the fanboy mentality is that if it's edgy and dark, if it's, you know, it looks like it's underexposed and it's miserable, then that's awesome. And if you don't like it, you suck because you're weak and you're lame. But, you know, obviously it's kind of an adolescent way to look at it. And I think the films have definitely benefited because so few people take that risk to just, you know, give people sort of a fun experience and, something that is very playful and not about, how awesome you are that you like something that's unpleasant.
That's a very good way to put it.
I have a question. Drax, are we going to get Arthur Douglas or not? Are we going to get the Arthur Douglas reveal in Volume 3 with Drax, or is that never? Are they just going to stick to the story that he's from this? He's just a member of the surface story that he's an alien and he's lost his wife. Any thoughts on that?
Sorry, the Drax is supposed to be. I'm not entirely sure that you're referring to.
Okay, Drax is in the comics. If you read the sort of, wikis or Marvel universes, the story goes that Drax was a human. He was killed. He did lose his wife and child in a Thanos-related incident, but his soul was put into this sort of alien body that, if I'm not mistaken, was sort of engineered to be something that could take Thanos out. So he was not. He's actually not really. He's not really an alien. He actually has roots in Earth. So, and of course, we got a little bit of backstory now with we're talking about the wife and daughter. But, I could very easily see in Volume 3 or perhaps in the Infinity Wars, him suddenly realizing that he's actually remembering being, Dave Bautista, who's a biker on Earth, and seeing, a woman at a bar in Texas, and that's his actual story. So I wonder, and also if they go that way, that gives us Moondragon, who is a sort of not someone that's a really popular character, but she is an Avenger, a very powerful telepath.
She's a really popular character amongst female queer fans, though. Like, we all know who Moondragon is. Okay. She was one of the first lesbians, in comics, basically.
Well, there we are. It comes back around. Okay, so and that's Drax's daughter. So, the daughter that he's referred to, fine. So, I mean, I just don't see how they can't deal with that or address that. That's got to be coming. Maybe they won't, but it is a part of the character. And so, I wonder about that now that they've started to develop him just a little bit more.
One thing that I want to say about Drax, though, is I really he was a source of comedy in this movie in the sense where he was making jokes, whereas in the last film, these jokes were all unintentional. So it really goes to show how the character development has gone for him, And I thought that was a cool way to show his character growth. I also think that, the scene where he talks about his father telling us the story of how he impregnated his mother was exactly the kind of example of, showing alien cultural approaches and how we wouldn't all necessarily be the same as each other. that I wish we
Right.
saw more of.
Yeah.
Like, just, humans have one way of looking at the world, and the aliens have a different one, and like maybe theirs is something else to offer, different from ours. And
the thing that struck me
like
about
it.
the first film, the thing that struck me about Drax in the first film is that he was essentially he's the Indian. He's in the volume 1. He was very much the sort of the Indian character that you get in an old Western. He's got a vendetta. He's got a certain simple way of speaking. He doesn't get metaphors, that whole thing, a noble savage, if you will. So, yeah, that totally. But in this one, I didn't see that. You're right. The character has evolved. He's making jokes now. He's not just this simple sort of, I don't get the, right. But definitely I think he started off as sort of this Indian character that, next to Star-Lord's swaggering cowboy.
Damn, that is true. Huh.
I've spent a lot of time thinking about this stuff. It's I'm glad I could.
And that is why we're happy to have you join us.
They spent a lot of time adding depth to the character, not just through that, but you had him talking about his wife and his kid and how he met his wife, and then his interactions with Mantis, especially that you're beautiful and all that stuff like that. It was very focused to like, all right, we need to add something more to this character than just having him make jokes and be the butt of jokes and be this killing machine.
Yes.
One of the things that I was particularly interesting about the first movie that I don't know if there's really a parallel for it here. A friend of mine, Mick Moore, who's like a film and TV producer, observed that the end of the first movie was everyone has to hold hands in order to save the world. And then what do they do once they save the world? They turn the powerful weapon over to the government for safekeeping. And that would be a very radical message to have in a Hollywood movie. Like, generally speaking, the messages are like, don't trust the government, you have to rebel against the government. And in this, it was sort of like, this particular government is a responsible authority and trustworthy. And actually, it's better off for them to protect this gem than to have random cowboys running around with it. It being a very gun control sort of a message, frankly, for the first movie that I wouldn't. Yeah, we don't really see it that much. That's not something that really happens. I'm not really sure if the end of this movie, other than recognizing that your family is, is the one that you're with right now, I didn't really quite see the same level of political analytical inversion to the Hollywood norm there. Mm-hmm. But I do really like, Brandon, David, I really do like your Trump analysis. That is sharp as hell. And I miss the Nova Corps, speaking of things, though. Like, the Nova Corps is this, like, great collective body of people coming together. I mean, the closest thing we have here are the Ravagers, which are really quite different because with the Ravagers, every single person is different.
Mm-hmm.
Except they're all
I think
male,
it was the dark
Michelle Yeoh.
Right, that's true. The Ravagers do kind of represent diversity in this sort of a different face of diversity. But I think because they wanted this one to have a slightly darker tone and kind of like, because that's what you do in the second film, always has to go darker. Xandar represents this sort of old school science fiction utopia that's incredibly diverse. That's what struck me in 2014 watching it. Like, okay, so you got the Kree, who are like the Kree Empire. The heavy is a guy who basically is a reactionary, who's like, I represent the old ways, almost like the first thing Ronan the Accuser says. He's this inflexible, representing an empire, an imperial force. And then you have Xandar, which is this, utopian science. There's a mixed marriage in there. John C. Reilly's married to someone who's not his race. So you have all of that. And I guess, I was expecting to see more of Xandar and the Nova Corps in this, but I think it really was like they knew that this was about family. So you have, the Guardians, the Ravagers, and then what Ego makes, the promise he makes. And I guess having the Nova Corps try to stop Ego. Oh, and then, of course, the generic scary family of the Sovereign, who are this sort of a family, but in it's very kind of unnatural, overly unnatural and sort of overly eugenicized sort of family that's a little scary. So yeah, I guess the Nova Corps didn't really fit in this one, but yeah, I'm sure we'll get them. They'll be back, and I know that there some fanboys don't like how they've been portrayed, but I miss Glenn Close because I love that Glenn Close was Nova Prime, because one of my beefs with Marvel, in addition to the not having enough diversity beyond African Americans, not enough people of Asian descent or Latinos. Also, they need more women over 40 in the Marvel universe. I mean, it's not. I'm really thrilled that Cate Blanchett's going to be in Thor, and I hope they keep doing that, because that's definitely an area of growth that they have to deal with.
So one thing, kind of touching off of the kind of what you were just talking about, the thing that stood out about The Sovereign is not just, you just brought up the eugenics, is I almost took them as like white pride, white nationalism. We need to keep our, but the twist on that too is they eventually start using the working class that is the Ravagers to meet their ends and get their goal. Very much like, I don't know what's going on now, where they manipulate with the promise of money and power or whatever if they do this task for them, which of course is never going to really pay off.
That's right on.
Yeah, I mean, that kind of stood out to me as a really interesting thing. And then, spoiler, with Adam Warlock being this perfect person that they're going to eventually build and birth, kind of, that I think just hones in and definitely doubles down on that interpretation.
But we're agreed, right? That's Adam Warlock. Like, that's Adam Warlock.
Absolutely.
Oh, absolutely. Adam Warlock. Yeah.
They even made sure to make sure that you saw the Infinity Stone. They left the space in the top where his head would be with some illumination, so you knew that there was an Infinity Stone there.
Wow.
Yeah, definitely Adam Warlock. Yeah.
Cool. Yeah, I figured it was just because it's a cocoon, and we know he's coming, therefore.
Right.
But
and there was a cocoon in the first. There was a cocoon in the first film, and I know that all the Adam Warlock people were really excited in the collectors. Collection. I missed him too. I missed the collector. I really liked Benicio in that, but I'm sure he'll be back. In any case, yeah, he was there in the cocoon. There was a cocoon, and there was speculation. And I know for especially the comic book fans who are maybe a little older than me, who are really into Cosmic Marvel, that's been a huge thing about whether Adam Warlock's going to, appear, and we got our answer. So yeah, definitely him. Yeah, for sure.
When he shows up in the comics, it's a definite, because that will happen.
Yeah, he hasn't been in anything for a while.
No, not at all.
No.
I knew Ego was going to be
I feel like he's a little before my time.
Ego started showing up in the comics a lot, so you knew that was kind of a play to what was coming for Guardians.
How funny. Right. They're really showing their hand then.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
What did you think about the whole explanation of the song Brandy and, like, going into the song analysis? It's interesting because that was in certain ways autobiographical from James Gunn. Like, he listened to that song and had that revelation as a young man at one point. I appreciated having somebody actually, like, talking and discussing music and meaning within the story. Mm-hmm. But I could see how someone might think it was a little bit like hitting you on the head. I don't know.
Someone pointed out, and I never went back, it was pointed out after I saw it for a second time, that basically Ego just repeats song lyrics, constantly repeats song lyrics, that he's actually got very little original thought, that all he's doing is repeating what he hears. And I don't know if that's necessarily true, because I don't have a script in front of me and can't analyze what he's saying versus all the music, but I just thought it was a really interesting observation, if true.
I would definitely have to check out for that.
Yeah.
I don't feel like he definitely quoted some songs, but it didn't stick out to me as being particularly like, here's a person who speaks in references kind of a thing. It'd be great if he was. That definitely be an interesting statement about perhaps he disseminated this culture, or perhaps this shows that he's actually not a creator really at all.
Yeah,
now,
I mean, I
this
think
is
that's
kind of
a big thing. Go ahead.
This is
Sorry.
a little baby. This is inside baseball, and this gets into the weeds. But they changed Ego from being an elder of the universe, like the Collector and the Grand Master. They changed him into being a Celestial, which is a different race. Any thoughts about that, or is it just because I don't think you can really kill an elder? Is it that simple? Like they needed something that they could kill.
Oh, I thought he wasn't a Celestial in this.
No, he makes a comment says that he's a Celestial.
He is a Celestial.
Yeah, he
does not have a cool-looking Jack Kirby head, so I have to reject that notion.
Right, no, because
I don't know.
I mean, he's not. He wasn't originally, but right, he does say to Gamora, I think, yeah, I'm a Celestial. He's kind of almost bragging a bit about it, but yeah.
Yeah, I think he says it like right before they go into the
That's right.
the Ghostbusters God, are you a God statement.
If somebody asks if you're a god, they say yes. Wow.
Yes,
right.
and then I joked and said, but make sure to correct it and say it's a small G, not a big G. You don't want to confuse them.
That was witty. That was witty. God, Kurt Russell was so good in this. So was Michael Rooker. The two of them just really were show stealers for me.
I think it was Rooker's film all the way. Like, I loved him in it.
He had so much more to do here than I expected that he would. Like, he was really one of the main characters, which was not what I expected.
Mm-hmm.
And no complaint, just surprised.
No.
With Ego, my one thought is that, like, his origin has so much to do with Galactus and, those kind of big picture characters that they might have gone the different route so they don't have to touch upon that. Since all that might be at Fox.
Right. Yeah, I believe they said they had to do a special deal to get Ego from Fox.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was the Negasonic Teenage Warhead deal.
Right.
I just learned about
although
that. For folks who don't know,
although Ego starts in Thor.
Freedom. Oh, okay.
Ego debuts in Thor, so he's not a Fantastic Four, even though he feels like it. But I guess he was up in their bundle, or maybe Gunn was really talking about Adam Warlock, but didn't want to give it away. Maybe that's a character that the Fox has the rights to. I don't know, but yeah. And of course, everyone's still waiting for the announcement that Fantastic Four is just being relinquished. At this point, I almost hope it doesn't happen because I think the absence of Fantastic Four has been really fruitful. Not that I don't like the Fantastic Four, but I just think it's really been to the good that they haven't had that franchise to take up so much room, and it's opened up for the Guardians and and for other things. So,
interesting point. One other thing I just wanted to chime in on because I thought it was important. So with Michael Rooker, the whole sequence where Star-Lord says, "You look like Mary Poppins," and Michael Rooker is like, "Is he a badass?" And Star-Lord says, "Yes." Star-Lord, as he's saying this, realizes that the answer, honest to God, is yes. And I think that's very on theme for the movie because it's all about if you ask like a teenage boy, is Mary Poppins badass? They're going to be like, no, Mary Poppins isn't cool because she's a stand-in mom figure and we don't like moms. Moms are lame. But if you're looking at this as an adult, you're like, well, she made cleaning fun and she took us on crazy trips and she helped us rebel in ways, yet we didn't get in trouble, and that's pretty badass. And she could fly.
Right.
And so, the fact that he begins it being like, haha, Mary Poppins, and then he realizes actually Mary Poppins is pretty cool, is sort of the same journey of, realizing that your parents are okay, that he goes on himself in terms of his own relationship to his pseudo dad.
Mhm.
And also Mary Poppins is badass, and I hadn't thought about it, and it's just for sexist, and now I know. Now I know why.
I didn't take it so much about Mary Poppins as it was about Yondu. Like, that's the moment he realizes that, no, Yondu really is my David Hasselhoff. And where it kind of, like, it comes out as a flippant joke. And then Yondu's like, oh, is he a badass? And, you know, it's that thing of like, well, you're a badass. You're reminding me of Mary Poppins. So therefore, yes, Mary Poppins is a badass. Like, I took it as the kind of that reverse.
Huh. Yeah, I can see that.
Because part of it is like the way he looks at Yondu too. You could see that that's the moment that he really has that like my dad is awesome look on it. Like you could just see it on his face and the way he's staring at him. So yeah, like I think that's the clicking point, and then kind of goes into his eulogy later on.
But I do think but the story is not. Peter Quill's grief with Yondu is not that his dad was or wasn't. Is not that Yondu was or wasn't badass. His grief was Yondu a nurturing parent who cared about him or not. Like, I think it's hard to deny that your pirate who takes care of you is like. I mean, they're a pirate, for Christ's sake. That's pretty badass. But I
kind of like badass
was,
parent.
I think this person loved me.
Yeah, and I kind of take the badass as like putting that all together. Like that to me, that judging by the way he looks at him and has that like adoring look, like I think that's the moment it clicks. Like everything clicks for him as to what Yondu is to him.
Mm. Do you think Yondu was an abusive parent, guys, within the world of the sci-fi fantasy, from what we know?
I kind of go with yours is like, don't we all have that, like, my parent sucks at some point moment in our life? And I just don't know how much of it was that. Like, it's really hard to say because like you mentioned, they've got that flashback where he's showing him how to shoot. And clearly, like, it's a very loving scene, even though it's, 5 seconds. It's one of those where it's kind of hard to tell, is this Peter remembering things as a kid, and, everyone's kid's kind of opinion is off as to the relationship with their parents, or is he telling the truth, or is it somewhere in between? Like, I have no idea. I really have no idea. Maybe I will bump into Michael Rooker again at San Diego Comic-Con, and I'll just ask him.
Ooh, what did he say the first time when you met him?
So, fun story. Michael Rooker is really exactly like you would expect him in real life. Voice, the way he acts, everything. And we were just kind of I was walking down the street, the sidewalk, going to a hotel and grabbing a drink. And I kind of hear someone behind me, and I was like, his voice sounds really familiar. I turn around. It's Michael Rooker's right behind me, following me as I'm weaving through the crowd. And I just, like, take a look forward, have this look on my face, like, is that Michael Rooker? And then turn it back and stare at him, and all you hear from me is, holy shit. And he starts laughing and, like, slaps me on the back. He's like, hey, how you doing? I'm like, okay. He's like, I'm just following you. Lead the way. And I'm just like, can we, take a picture together as we walk? He's like, yeah, let's go for it. So just really cool guy. He's exactly like you would expect, and, loved it. People were like, Rooker, you rule, and just yelling at him. And he's, high-fiving people and like, just loved it. You can tell he's one of those actors that really loves the fans and was enjoying the time and walking and that experience. Because the other thing that stood out to me is, like, most of the other celebrities have cars and security and all that stuff, and it was like him, and there might have been like an assistant with him. And other than that, like, the security literally was me, all 5'6" of me, weaving through the crowd. And I had no idea I was doing that until probably halfway through the walk.
Oh, that's funny.
I love Michael Rooker for that reason alone.
Yeah, that's cool. That's cool.
Yeah.
Do you feel like there's any sequences from the movie that you would, like, show to one of your film classes to be like let's break this down and see how it's done? This is a good model of X, Y, and Z.
In the second film, I think, well, certainly the opening credits. It's great in terms of the way it uses space. It's great in that, you know, you have to they have to sort of respect the space, and you have to know where you are at all times, and the use of foreground and background. I mean, that's very skilled filmmaking. So definitely that was a standout moment. I think that the prison break, which is in this film, it stood out to me, and that maybe I was a little bit, and I'm sure it was because I had my 5-year-old, but, you know, it's PG-13. No one told me it was a PG film. But, you know, a scene like that, of that kind of mass murder, done with a peppy pop song. And as I tweeted and said on Facebook, you know, the next day I see The Lovers with Deborah Winger and Tracy Letts, and that's rated R because they, you know, use the F word a few times, and Deborah Winger has an orgasm. But, you know, an arrow going through and killing about, you know, 35, 40, 50 people, PG, with a nice pop song, is PG-13. It's a well done scene, though, and I mean, I certainly would show that because I think there's a lot to sort of talk about there, about how, you know, with the right song and done the right way, the scene, which is then, when you think about it, kind of horrific and could be really disturbing, is actually done in a way that doesn't feel that way, but it maybe still is kind of disturbing. And again, the first film didn't quite. The first film actually shied away from that kind of thing. You know, famously, Ronan says, you know, cleanse it on the kiln, and we don't see them then liquidate everybody on the kiln who's a survivor and kill them. But, you know, he's a bad guy, and I guess it would be as fun to show that. So I thought that was an interesting thing in terms of our how we deal with how we're comfortable with violence, and then how the way you direct a scene really kind of changes everything.
The thing with that scene, I think what's interesting to me is how they broke it up with humor. Like, it went from tons of stabbing and killing, and then they have the scene with Baby Groot, who then goes all crazy and attacks his abuser, which is yet more murder. Yet it's done in a way that's like, you sit there and you're like, oh, that's really funny and cute, and you actually forget they just literally killed 50 people, and Baby Groot tossed a dude off like a walkway. Like, people were rooting for that and cheering and smiling and laughing, and I'm like, yeah, you just basically had an infant murder someone. Like, this is slightly twisted.
But he poured a beer on him, so he had it coming. Oh my God, it was so hard to watch Baby Groot getting bullied and abused. It's like fucking hard.
Yes, it was. Yes.
As it should be,
but
right?
This funny is that scene was like really hard to watch, but the thing I liked about it is they actually showed the repercussions of the bullying that you don't necessarily see all the time. Like, he's broken and dejected, and like that walk afterwards where you just feel it. And, you know, I know I was bullied and picked on as a kid, so like I could totally relate to that. And I don't think you see that often in films where you see that, you know, follow up of the, hey, this person was bullied, and we get to see them feel shitty and like down afterwards in a semi-realistic way.
That's interesting. I can imagine that that's overlooked a lot because it's not fun.
No, yeah, that's the thing. Is like, it's not fun. So like, why would you show it? But they showed it for a while too, because he's like walking by and they call him over. So it's not like a short scene. It's, you know, probably whatever 15 seconds of him walking, which is feels like a lot.
You know, I'm kind of sad that we're already having teenage Groot. Like, I'm glad Groot is growing, but I thought we'd have like child's Groot. Like, this was definitely toddler Groot. I thought we'd get like to 8-year-old Groot, you know. But I guess just going to the teen years.
Yeah, I mean, and also let's remember the next time we see the Guardians, it will be 4 years from the end of Volume 2, because Volume 2 is actually, we're going back in time for Volume 2, because Volume 2 would be taking place around the time of Age of Ultron, maybe a little bit
It's
before.
2014.
Right. So yeah, it's probably not even Age of Ultron. It's like 2 months, right? So it was like the end of 2014 when Guardians Volume 2 was taking place. So next time we see Groot, right, he'll be at least a teenager, if not, if not older. And I also wanted to point out, so I mentioned the Rocket's big scene too, where he got to take out the Ravagers. I thought that was really impressive, and Rocket's probably. I like Rocket a lot. I'm not sure I have a favorite Guardian. It's a toss up between Gamora and I guess and Rocket, but it was nice to see them really show that, because in the first film, they stick Rocket in a ship for the big third act, for the big battle. And I guess I have a feeling they felt like they needed to show that Rocket was formidable as a combatant, just to hand to hand, not just in the ship, because of course he's a 3-foot raccoon, but it was nice to see him get to kind of cut loose and get his kind of Wolverine scene.
Yeah, that was interestingly staged. I liked how he fought them. I thought it was interesting.
Yeah. I would say with the time frame that you're going, that's something that really I thought was really interesting, is they actually definitively say what time it is, because there is when the opening scene starts with in the flashback, they say it's 1980. And then when that ends, they say 34 years later. So now we have a definitive time that it's 2014 in Guardians of the Galaxy 2, which I thought was really, really interesting, in that I don't think they've put a time on like any other film. Nothing really stood out that I can think of where they've done that and been like, it is this date, and this year. And I always thought they kind of did that to make it timeless in a weird way. But they've got a stamp on here, which I thought was really fascinating, because I think it's the first time they've done that.
They did something similar in Volume 1, because it starts, it says Earth 1988, and then it tells you how many years later.
I forgot about that.
It does say but they only really do that with Guardians. I don't think any other of the MCU films have really sort of been that specific about, when the whens and wheres, maybe a couple of flashbacks. I know the one in Civil War, the sort of very important flashback they do register as 1991, but they can sometimes be, and really I think the big missed opportunity time-wise was Doctor Strange, a film where the whole theme is about time. I really didn't understand why they didn't, show us events in the MCU happening in the background as Doctor Strange is learning his craft, which presumably should take some time for him to become the Sorcerer Supreme. And there's sort of a suggestion that it's a long period of time, but I thought they really missed an opportunity to show us, and while he's doing this is when there was a big Iron Man suit battle with the president involved. Like they missed that opportunity. And for Guardians, I think it's really important, because you're off of Earth, and you really need to know the time. Otherwise, they need you to know that it's now, because I think we might otherwise have the Star Wars reflex of assuming that this is happening sometime else, and there's really not much connection between the two films so far, aside from Thanos. So it's important that we know that this is happening in our time, just far away.
Well, I think you're right. Speaking of time, though, so Peter gets a Zune, right? And I think it's cute because it's just so period-specific piece of technology. But I really hope that they continue to situate the music in the same time period, because that's such an important part of the aesthetic. And there's no reason why somebody's Zune wouldn't have more songs by Sweet on it, let's be honest. But it's also a metaphor for his world expanding. Like, he has the ability to listen to more than just his own mom's music now.
Right.
How do
I
they
wanted
plug
to
it
make
in?
sure you had a chance to talk about your, David, your list of which band each one of the Marvel teams from the movies is.
Right. Like I said, the day after the first one, I just started doing this sort of analogy for bands for the big Marvel groups, and so I think it started with the Fantastic Four. I kind of thought that they would be like the Beatles because they're the first family. They have this sort of the group has this sort of special status where they're the Fantastic Four is never outlaws. They're sort of looked up to. They got a building in the middle of New York City and all that, and yet there's this sort of psychedelic aspect to them because they go off in space and negative zones, negative and things like that. So yeah, I thought that fit. The Stones for the X-Men, which I know some people have thought maybe other bands, but to me, the Stones being the sort of opposite, the outlaw opposite number, even though that's all kind of, that's not really as quite as I don't know they are. It may be just a way we.
It's more image than
a dichotomy.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So, a dichotomy we put on them rather than one that's organic. But in any case, yeah. So the X-Men are kind of like the Stones, and then the Avengers are Led Zeppelin. And of course, I felt vindicated when the Thor Ragnarok trailer dropped with Led Zeppelin because of the Led Zeppelin in the sense that these like heavy lifters in the Avengers who have this Thor bringing this sort of mythology that Led Zeppelin like to sort of traffic in, so that fit when I think of them. And really, it's the first team. I don't know that the subsequent Avengers teams, Led Zeppelin's probably not as appropriate, but that first team with Thor and the Hulk, it definitely felt like Led Zeppelin was the right choice. Mm-hmm. Then I said Defenders. I likened them to the Doors, and of course, I have to now do a caveat. This is the sort of comic book Defenders in which Doctor Strange is always the sort of the center of it. Without Doctor Strange, the Defenders that we're about to get on Netflix, I think seems a lot more like the Ramones, just because they are the sort of let's get back to basics, let's strip down street fighting heroes, taking us back to very New York, exactly. And then for the Guardians, again, at first I think I thought about Roxy Music, because glam rock seems very fitting, but then I just realized ELO was definitely the one, and there they are in the opening of Volume 2. So so that was my little analogy for, and I tried to keep it roughly in the same time period. So yeah, those are our groups.
Well, somebody in your thread asked you about what the DC teams would be as bands, and you said, you're not a really big DC person. So I volunteered myself, and I'm actually not completely ready to present my list to the class, as it were. But I did want to throw out a couple of things. So I determined that Birds of Prey is definitely Bikini Kill because people can't believe that it took that long for them to happen. And they were completely female-driven. This isn't like there's no Svengali like there was with the Runaways. Like Bikini Kill is Bikini Kill. They invented themselves. They're all women, and they're badass. I said that the Teen Titans are the Kinks because if you don't know any better, you'd think they were good boys, but they're really actually having fist fights while wearing their formal suits on stage. And everyone has got a massive chip on their shoulder, and the music is way smarter than anybody thinks it is, unless they're familiar with their oeuvre. I decided that Doom Patrol is Throbbing Gristle / Psychic TV, both stages of it. In which case, your guys are like, most people are like, who's having Gristle and who's Psychic TV? You're like, these are like Throbbing Gristle invented industrial music. Psychic TV was like a very early industrial band, super obscure. Like, you have members who are trans, much as Doom Patrol had one of the first trans writers, and are just, like, completely avant-garde. Even in their earliest formation, like Doom Patrol in the 60s, was still already avant-garde. I think the Blue and the Gold, a.k.a. Booster Gold and Blue Beetle, are Hall & Oates. I'm very confident in that. They don't get any respect, but they're actually good. And I have to leave you with, because I'm still working on some of these bigger teams, Lobo himself is Kiss. Just Lobo. So he's only in it for the money, and he has all the makeup. Everybody thinks that he's really cool, especially if they're a 14-year-old boy, or me. I happen to be a big fan of Kiss, although I'm not a big fan of Lobo, to be honest. But I just could imagine all of that. If they were from space, they would be Lobo.
Does Lobo put his face on like every tchotchke known to man?
Wouldn't he? Like, he became faithful.
I think he
But all of you did.
He would if he
that's
could.
true.
I think he'd be very happy with that. Yeah, I do know Lobo. My DC knowledge is far not nearly as robust as my mastery of Marvel. But I would say Lobo would definitely put his face everywhere and sell it if he could.
Yeah, exactly. So I'm still working on polishing that, but I have lots of thoughts. I think that JSA is Shana Na because they're like going back to be retro even before being retro was known as being retro. Like there wasn't even a term for like what they were doing, but it was already retro at that time.
Right.
So anyway, stay tuned, guys. I will be revealing which exact 80s hair metal band Suicide Squad and Secret Six will be. So we'll be stay tuned. Because I'm kind of going back and forth about which. I'm going back and forth between whether Suicide Squad is Guns N' Roses and Secret Six is Motley Crue, or
I would flip it.
Because like Motley Crue is particularly incestuous, as is Secret Six, and they both games. Like they're bad for you and they're so good. They're bad for you and they're so good. Like you're probably less healthy for having played it, but you feel very vindicated.
See, I would go Suicide Squad being Crew and then Secret Six being GNR.
Because?
So Secret Six feels a little bit more badass in what they do and a little bit more rock and roll in their attitude, where Suicide Squad, I'm just trying to think of like the best way to describe it. It's kind of cheesy when you think about it, I guess, in a way, but you love it anyways.
I think, like, to me, like, one of the definitive, like, specific things about Guns N' Roses is that they released one of the few, like, literal perfect albums, being Appetite for Destruction. And, like,
True.
How do you reflect that? Like, in spite of everything, in spite of being a complete shit show and fighting. I mean, like, right, like, both of these are bands that beat each other up, and there's just drugs and people dying, and there's, like, casual, like, people who they know vaguely die through manslaughter. It's like, these are those bands. But that I always commented that Motley Crue actually has way more good songs than people think they did, and has more good albums collectively than Guns N' Roses did. But Guns N' Roses did have one of the few like literal perfect albums. So that kind of confused which one I assigned to which band. And
going by that logic, then
movies, right? Because I think like the Suicide Squad movie, which I didn't see, would probably be like some shitty new metal bands that I wouldn't listen to, right?
That's a good question. I jokingly I would say Blink-182. No, I know. My gut response is Blink-182.
Yeah, right. Yeah, I was going to say something like new, like yeah, exactly. Something Suicide Squad, which I did see recently, and it is absolutely terrible. Blink-182. Yeah, I might.
What is Jared
I might
Leto
even go to Nickelback. I might even say Nickelback and just throw down the gauntlet, which I know that's the ultimate put down. But it doesn't reflect maybe the swagger they think they have, but that's how much I hated Suicide Squad. But
if you go Nickelback. If you go Nickelback, then I'll say then that's the thing that everyone says they hate, but secretly they actually like some of it.
Nobody likes Nickelback. I don't know. Scott Walker likes Nickelback. We know this because that was a protest sign that was actually used. Oh no, I'm sorry. It was Rahm Emanuel. Rahm Emanuel likes Nickelback was one of the protest signs at the teachers union rally.
The greatest protest sign of our time. Yeah.
It really is. They should accredit it to one of the Chicago public school teachers.
Yeah, no, that teacher deserves a Pulitzer for that sign. Yeah, that was amazing. But yeah, if you haven't seen Suicide Squad, I don't recommend it. It's not. Don't bother unless you have no choice. And probably every band we've mentioned has a song in the film. I just don't remember because there's literally a different song every 3 minutes. So And they only play, of course, about 40 seconds of each song. So very much let's look what they did with Guardians. Let's copy that, but without any of the insight or talent or heart. You know, it's just the most on the nose top. You know, the biggest hit of that particular band, the most obvious choice. Again, you really appreciate what James Gunn does when you see something like that, because it was pretty unbearable.
Yeah, that was a very good point. A very good point about him, like, actually thinking about the significance of the song and thinking about the contents and not just going for the obvious choices among it. I still don't know why they used Fox on the Run in those trailers, and I had such high hopes of hearing it in the movie, but I'll have to live without it. So.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for joining us. We've had you for a while, and I know we've wanted to have you on, so this has been fantastic to have. If you have any final concluding thoughts about the movie, let her rip, and otherwise, we would love to hear where our listeners can find you on the internet.
Well, thank you. I guess I'll keep it short. Guardians is definitely, I think, when the book of Marvel is being written, I think that Guardians is going to have a really unique place. It's also broken the sort of the curse of the second film that not all Marvel films, I mean, there have been sequels that have done well, but I mean, this is Winter Soldier, of course, is a great example of that. But I think this is the first. This is the time when this is only the second time, I suppose, when a second film is really delivered and not disappointed. I think if you didn't love the first one, then yeah, it makes perfect sense that you're not going to love Guardians, and there is an aspect of it's like the first one but more. But I think when the book of Marvel's written, James Gunn's definitely going to get his own sort of special section, because he's been able to do something and really bring an authorship to this series that is sorely lacking. I think in a lot of Marvel's biggest missteps is when they put in someone didn't sort of had lost faith, like with Favreau and Iron Man 2, where he clearly kind of lost his way with the material, having all these Avengers people come in after he established this kind of very specific realistic world, or Alan Taylor, who is not an untalented director but obviously just had no real connection to Thor. It's an interesting little thing to watch, and I'm very curious to see how this ends. It probably will be Gunn's his farewell, although now I've read that he's essentially being given sort of advisory status now for all their plans for Cosmic Marvel, which I presume includes Captain Marvel. So his role will transition after the third one, but it's been a really interesting thing to watch and very enjoyable. And again, you find me on geniusbastard.com. I have a blog that's there that I have not I am fitfully prolific with. It depends on what time of the school year I'm in. So I haven't posted anything too recently, but I did earlier in the year. I posted a few things, and of course you can find me at Twitter at geniusbastard.com, at geniusbastard is on Twitter. So and thank you very much for having me.
Absolutely, thank you for joining us.
Yeah, appreciate it. Thank you for coming on.
Thank you.
So, Brett, do you want to tell people what's going to be happening in our 200th episode? Are we allowed to say that yet?
I think we should hold off, but just till we get everything completely 100% confirmed. But it's pretty big. I'm going to go with that.
We can at least tell folks that, we have a big 200. We've been doing this. It's going to be our 200th episode next week, and we have some amazing guests planned for you.
I will say it's a prime episode that's going to be the catalyst for so much more to come. Let's go with that.
Ooh, that's good. That's good. It'll be a whole new universe of exciting episodes from us moving forward.
Yes, absolutely. So we're going to forge a new buzz. Sure, we'll go with that. Hint. But yeah, that's going to be a special day and time, Tuesday at 7 p.m. We have got 2 confirmed guests. It's going to be awesome. I know I'm excited. Alana's excited. It's going to be sweet. So as soon as I can, it's going to be up on Blog Talk Radio and, of course, Graphic Policy to help promote everything. So watch. It's going to be pretty damn awesome. It's going to be a great episode. Let's go with that. As always, thank you so much for listening. If you came in late, like I did, you can go and listen to the episode on iTunes and Stitcher. Probably like an hour or 2. It's going to be up on SoundCloud tomorrow. It'll be posted on our site, Graphic Policy, tomorrow, so you can listen to it on demand, share it with your friends, catch it again. A whole bunch of options for you. So, hooking you up. So come back to the site tomorrow and you can catch all of that. And Alana, tell folks where they can catch you.
On Twitter, all the time, at ELANA_Brooklyn. That's Elana_Brooklyn. Far too much. And I'm actually, yes. Mm-hmm.
No, you can go ahead. Sorry for cutting you off.
I was going to say also just a preview that, like, we're going to be doing another Pop Politics tweet chat coming up on May 24th. For fans of Steven Universe or people who realize that they need to be, we'll be talking about that show 9 o'clock at night. Nice.
That'll be a very cool thing to take part in, and the first one went over huge. So you'll definitely keep your eye out, and that'll be a fun thing. And for those who want to check out more of the site, you can catch us at graphicpolicy.com or on Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, Tumblr, all at Graphic Policy, keeping it nice and consistent. So as always, thank you for listening. I'm Brett.
I'm Ilana.
Keep it geeky.
Hey, thanks for watching the previous video from Graphic Policy Television. Just by watching, you help support our site. Thank you so much. Now, if you're watching these videos, you probably care about geeky things like movies, television, comic books, toys, games, video games, you name it. You can go and subscribe right now to our YouTube channel to stay in touch and catch all the new videos, or check out our website at graphicpolicy.com. There's a nice link on this end of the video. But as always, thank you for watching. Keep on rocking and keep it geeky.